Howdy. For the purposes of this series of videos, set of videos, whatever, I'll be Mr. Smith, or Smithy, or whatever you like, really, because in my actual life, in my real life, I'm a high school science teacher. Hi kids, be good, stay inside, all that sort of stuff. We've been asked, the band's been asked, if we would add to an online community offering help with homeschooling, going through the topics that you normally would do in the school. So I will be mainly focusing, certainly initially, on what we call in the UK Key Stage 3 Science. That's years, so from the age of about 11 to the age of 14. So let's run an intro. Yeah.
Make me an armchair superstar and give me an all-out nuclear war and give me a call wherever you are.
Hi again. As I was saying, these sequence of videos, these sequences of lessons are aimed primarily at ages 11 to about 14. So if you're an astrophysicist, it's not for you. Okay. I'll be mainly following the English national curriculum and going through and, as I say, aiming at that sort of age group. We're starting off with the topic Earth and Space, which I wanted to talk about early ideas of the solar system and all that, which is up there if I'm pointing the right way, probably up there. Okay, so let's make a start. Really early ideas. As a species, we've always and clearly been fascinated with those bright starry things that come out at night, and the moon and the sun and all of that sort of stuff, and you can trace it all the way back through history. We still are fascinated with those things, and there'll be a lot of people on the telly telling you that there's lots of little grey men up there. There might be, don't know. The universe is big, really big, in the words of Douglas Adams. Really, I don't think he uses that many really. Really big. The earliest known observatory, if you will, that we've discovered on the planet is Newgrange in Ireland. Now, Newgrange in Ireland is about 5,000 years old, and it's our earliest known example of something that is directly aligned to something in the skies. The passageway that you can see at the front of the photo there goes all the way through, and it's aligned to the sunrise on the winter solstice, which is very pretty, and so almost certainly is something to define time, to become a calendar, as was this place several hundred years later, like 3,000 years BCE, before Common Era. I'm not a historian. I'm a science teacher, biologist, singer, writer. This is, of course, one of those wonderful things that that we couldn't possibly have done on our own, could we, as a species? We couldn't have got them big heavy rocks from where them come from. It must be them aliens. It must have been them aliens. I won't go into the many reasons why we could have done it, and indeed the theories and ideas as to how we did. Now, Stonehenge appears to be a couple of steps up from the last one, in that Stonehenge certainly seems to act as a calendar. I think just looking at Stonehenge you can see that there's demarcations around the circle, but it aligns to both the summer and the winter solstice. the shortest and longest days of the year in the northern hemisphere. And obviously was a very important place, so we've obviously looked at the heavens for a very long time and known, or at least thought of them being important. That little beep is that I've got another move on my words with friends. So I'll look forward to that after this, maybe in several minutes. Oh yes, so we all love the pyramids of Giza, amazing structures, again a few hundred years on from Stonehenge. What I love about the pyramids, it's just such an easy example to use for the conspiracy theorists, for the we are nothing like a resilient, intelligent, creative species. We have to rely on them aliens again. I think you'll find that slavery and whips go rather a long way when it comes to building big things and moving big things. But what's undoubtable is that the alignment of the main structures, which again I think are there, and the smaller pyramid. I meant to get in at the bottom, but I think PowerPoint seems to have just cut it off. But it's theorized that they are the same constellation as Orion's belt, that they are the three main stars of Orion's belt. Now I know, again, astrophysicists, I know that at least two of the stars in Orion's belt aren't just single stars. I know that one of them is a two-star system, a binary system, and the other one's thought to be several more than that. I've got a cat down there that's now playing with things and scratching. Stop scratching. Naughty boy. Naughty boy. It's also theorized that where they are in relation to the Nile mirrors where Orion's belt is in relation to the rest of the Milky Way. There are shafts in the main pyramid that seem to point up to the positions of certain stars around that time on Orion's belt. So there's probably links to the old the skies. I've not scripted this, can you tell? Chichen Itza in Mexico, in the Yucatan province. So we're skipped forward quite a way now, but another quite amazing structure, somewhere I've never been. I've not been to the pyramids either. In fact, I've not even been to Stonehenge. I'm in England. I'm in the northwest of England. Stonehenge is a bit down that way, to be fair, but I've never seen Stonehenge. True life. Chichen Itza is the name of the place in the Yucatan where this structure was built. Now, this particular structure, it's still scratching. It's because it's nice and sunny in here, so he's bathing in the sun. Anyway, Chichen Itza on the certain times of the year, the autumn equinox and the spring equinox. You can see the stairs there-ish, and you can see the shadows. And the idea is, the theory is, that on those days, when the sun gets into a certain position, it's probably noon, I couldn't tell you, that you see that zigzag shape, which is supposed to be representative of a serpent climbing up the scales at the back of the serpent. At the top there are, it seems that this temple is dedicated to the winged serpent bird thing called Quetzalcoatl. I'm sure there are better ways of pronouncing that. Quetzalcoatl will do for me. And so it seems to mirror that on the equinoxes, the spring equinox, the autumn equinox. Equinox equal night, meaning that on the equinoxes, day length is the same as night. What's next? Hiya again. Sorry, had to take a quick break because the cat was scratching too much on the couch, and needed to be told that that was only for naughty boys, and that he wasn't a naughty boy, he was a good cat. So, skip forward again to the Greeks. Why wouldn't you? The Greeks. Oh, I've just gone forward. The Greeks. Responsible for lots of things. Seen as being perhaps the first civilization that started trying to look at things through the eyes of perhaps a scientist or in a scientific way. Although you can argue, and I'm very happy if you do, but don't do it with me, that many of the previous examples were about measurement and recording, and yeah, they were. But let's move on. Aristotle. So as we all do, as all scientists do, Aristotle rode on the back of many others. There's Pythagoras and his mates and a few others before him. But Aristotle is mostly credited with coming up with the geocentric model. I now realise that you won't be able to see all of that properly. And my cat is now deciding to climb on the curtains. Oi, rabbit! Get down. Good boy. Good boy. Come here. Yeah, he's called Rabbit. He's a good boy. And he's just out of screen. He'll probably jump on screen at some point. If I move the pen from where I'm sat, he'll probably come up in a bit. You're a good boy. Where was I? I also noticed that the dates there, you can't see. It says 384 to 322 BCE. Before Common Era? Probably that's what it means. What Aristotle did, what a lot of people had done before that, is realise that through observations that anybody can do, you can do them out of the side, out of your window, stay inside, look out of your window, or go far enough away from each other. Cat's now on my legs. Oh, hello, sweetie. That if you observe the night sky, if you observe the sun, then it appears to rise in the morning, in the east, transit across the sky, reach its high point around midday, reach the zenith around midday, and then carry on its journey and set at night. So it makes total sense through observation that we, as a planet, the Earth, is at the centre of the universe, with everything rotating, revolving, going around us, orbiting us. And it was from the Greeks that we get the word planet, because watching the planets do the same thing, the Greeks called them planetos, which means wanderers, and that's where we get the name from. From there, we get to Ptolemy, with a silent P. There's almost certainly a joke there. If you want to let me know, please do. I'm not going to try and do that. Ptolemy. The Ptolemaic idea. What Ptolemy observed was when he was watching the planets, so he's watching the planets in the night sky, seem to go up and down. But if you do that over a long time, not only did they change direction, but they seemed to change their place in the sky and kind of do a bit of a zigzag here and a bit of a zigzag back. Now, his explanation he called epicycles, where an orbit wasn't wholly circular, but had these wobbles, which you can just about see, hopefully, in that diagram. So these wobbles, these epicycles, seem to explain the zigzagging up and down, the wobbling across the sky of the planets as he observed them. Still, with the Earth in the centre. Everything's still going around us, still very much geocentric. Where do we go from here? Oh, I put this up because, of course, this idea was accepted for a very long time. And because it becomes relevant later, and not for particularly any other reason, it was accepted as part of Christian ideology that the Earth was at the centre of everything. And there's lots of good theological reasons why that should be accepted as a model. Copernicus. I nicked that joke. I suspect the person who nicked it as well. What I mean is Copernicus. Copernicus, we're now going forward a long time, and there was a lot in between. I've not mentioned Chinese astronomers. I've not mentioned the work of the Islamic scientists and mathematicians and the astronomy that came from there also, because these are the main points. Now, what Copernicus did was he looked at these epicycles. He looked at the wobbles. He looked at the wobbles of Mars as we watch Mars over several weeks and plot where it goes, where it appears in the sky at certain times and how it seems to wobble. What Copernicus worked out, what he calculated, was that this epicyclic model, Ptolemy's epicycles, these strange sort of circles within circles, couldn't work in reality. And through his measurements, the only possible thing that could cause this wobbling transit across the skies was us moving around the sun. And as we moved around the sun, and Mars moved around the sun, and Venus moved around the sun, and all of that, that the only explanation from all the measurements and the calculations that Copernicus did was that the sun must be the centre of this particular system and the planets must orbit the sun. There were also things about observing the phases of Venus and where it was in relation to the sun, whether it was in front of, behind, etc. This, of course, got Copernicus into a bit of bother. He had a bit of bother with the church because they weren't very keen on this idea. Kepler. Johannes Kepler, on the back of Copernicus, he came up with his 3 laws of planetary motion, and the most significant, I would say, arguably, if you want to argue, great, do it down there, I'll probably ignore you, was the idea of elliptical orbits. The idea that an orbit is not completely circular, but is stretched. And sometimes it's further away from the sun, and sometimes it's closer to the sun, in a kind of egg-shapey type orbit, a kind of flattened oval type of orbit. And he could then work out, along with Copernicus, the order of the planets from the sun. I think Copernicus had done this before, where he'd put Mercury and then Venus, and there'd been some discussion, some argument before about which was closer to the sun, whether it Venus, was it Mercury. But between them, they'd sorted this one out. He had 2 other laws of motion, of planetary motion too, but they're all mathematical stuff about the radii, the differences in the radii from the sun, etc. I won't be going into them. Where do we go now? Galileo Galilei. Galileo Galilei. What a brilliant name. I'm not sure I can say it, but what a brilliant name. I always imagine that, you know, in the 16th century, there's Mr. and Mrs. Galilei, and they're waiting for the nurse or doctor or both. Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Galilei. I've got your baby. It's a beautiful, healthy boy. Looks normal, looks all right, looks like might come up with a few good ideas. Don't look, order out. Have you thought of a name? Now, it's funny you should mention that, funny you should ask. We were thinking Galileo Galilei. Yeah. I don't know really how you come up with this sort of stuff, but if I've mispronounced his name or anything, then we can perhaps just sort that one out. Well, I'm enjoying myself anyway. He's not called Galileo Figaro. Oh, no. I have to admit, and if you don't like this, please switch off, go somewhere else. I'm not mad keen on Queen. They're all right. They're all right. I'm not a big fan. Very talented people, all of them. You know, even drummy chap, he wrote a few songs, quite well known. Brian May and his hair, and he knows a lot more about astronomy than I do, and than most of you do. You've got PhD in it. So you can go and ask Brian, and he will tell you lots more. There's the other Brian as well. Nice, Mr. Cox, he's nice. But no, not mad keen. Anyway, I digress. Yeah, moons. So Galileo's famous for a number of things. What Galileo did was, some people tell you, some places you'll read that he invented the telescope. I'm not sure that's the case. I think he might have nicked the idea, but made it a bit better. He's credited as being the first person who got a telescope and pointed it at the sky and looked way beyond the nearest planets, the moon, the nearest planets in our system. The diagram you can see was the drawings that Galileo made over several weeks of the bodies that were moving around Jupiter, the moons of Jupiter. And what you may be able to see from those diagrams is the large circle is Jupiter, the little stars are the moons, and he plotted their positions over days and weeks. He plotted how they seemed to move, how their positions seemed to change. And the only explanation for this is that they were orbiting Jupiter, and so their positions appeared to change dependent on where they were in their orbits at any particular time. He then did further observations of Venus, and came to the same conclusion. And so his theory was that if a body, Jupiter, has moons orbiting it, then that proved that not everything orbited the Earth, and so supported the heliocentric model. Now at this point, I had no idea why things orbited and why we were orbiting the Sun and all the other planets were orbiting the Sun, but observation and calculation seemed to prove that things were orbiting things and not us. This, of course, also got him into a bit of bother with the church, who didn't really like it and told him that he was under house arrest for the rest of his life, which he was. And so he had to imprison himself in his own house and died there. His work was published a couple of months after he died, or just around the same time that he died. And it had a disclaimer on it saying, it's a bit silly all this, isn't it? You know, all characters that appear in this are purely fictional, and any resemblance to real people, living or dead, is pure. It had a disclaimer on it saying it's some ideas, you might like them, the rubbish though, but they weren't. And then we get on to the boss, Sir Isaac Newton, who did lots of things. Did Newton, and he was a bit of a strange chap by all accounts, not particularly pleasant or convivial chap. He was a member of lots of interesting organisations, kind of at the forefront of a scientific revolution in England. and across Europe, where at the time science was mixed with magic and alchemy, and so there was a lot of crossover between those areas, because people were looking at things and trying to understand things and couldn't always come up with logical answers. Isaac, of course, came up with the theory of gravity. I love it when I read that he discovered gravity like it didn't exist before. Up until that point, it was like, woo, and you let go of things and it just carried on going, woo. I have to do that trick. Woo. It's not a very good trick, is it? There's the popular image of an apple either falling on his head or falling, or you watched it. He may have observed apples falling. He may not have done. I don't know. I weren't there. What he did do was ask the question, why do things fall down? It's incredibly frustrating and saddening as a scientist that in this day and age I do still see quite a lot of videos saying that gravity doesn't exist. I'm coming up with alternative theories. It's fine. It's not true. Please stop believing it. Please don't watch these things. They're absolute garbage. Please don't. Anyway, gravity. The reason this links in is because up until that point, we had no idea why bodies orbited around other bodies, and indeed smaller bodies, moons, orbiting around larger bodies, planets. Smaller bodies, planets, orbiting around larger bodies, suns and stars. And Newton finally came up with an explanation for that, which we call gravity. Gravity is all to do with mass attracting mass. And if you have mass attracting mass, and you have motion in one direction, and that motion will do it that way, and if that motion is at the right speed, the right velocity, then it will always try and fall towards the middle, but it will pass by and keep trying to fall towards the middle, and so on and so forth and so on. And if I was in school and I had it, I'd now have a pair of tights with a ball inside, and I'd do that with it. And I could have probably thought about getting something like that, and I forgot. So you just have to make do with that. Right, I'm going to leave that there for now. I hope in some ways you may have found it useful, albeit all this has been is storytelling. This has just been giving information. I will go on from this to do some teaching on seasons, on phases of the moon, on night and day, and things like that, and things that will require a little bit more explanation. But as I say, I hope it's been useful. I'll be back soon. If there's anything else that you would like me particularly to go through, I'm more than happy to put things down there in the comments. In your downtime, please go and visit the rest of the songs, the rest of our music, because you know they're nice and you might like them, or you've got a lot of time on your hand, so you might as well do. Anyway, love, peace. Do as you're asked, be sensible, look after each other. And Todd, hi. I'll see you soon. Take care of yourselves. Bye.